Hello, everybody, and welcome back to YHS 2021. We are so excited to kick off our very first panel of the day. Today's focus has been on rethinking. All of our environments are being constantly rethought thanks to accelerating advancements in technology, from our personal to our work and school environments. Big data and artificial intelligence are allowing companies to find, understand, and provide for their customers in ways that were unimaginable just a decade ago. And for many in our industry, this progress is exhilarating. Now, the thought process behind our next panel began with Christina and Alex, our content creators from the speaker department here at YHS. They were having a conversation where they were struggling to comprehend the monetary value of their personal data. How can companies balance limitless innovation in the fields of data tech while still respecting the boundaries that maintain consumer privacy? That leads us to our next panel, the Non Human Touch, where we will dive into solutions for this question. Now, before I forget, everybody, once you have a question during the panel, do not hesitate to put it into the chat box, because once the Q&A session starts, you will no longer be able to submit questions, so once it comes into your head, put it into the chat. Anyways, without further ado, I would love to introduce the moderator of this panel, Professor Ian Miller, who is a senior lecturer here at EHL. Mr. Miller has played a crucial role in organizing the Hospitality Industry Technology Exposition and Conference. And for those of you who don't know, that is Europe's largest travel tech discussion platform, a huge accomplishment. We are so lucky to have a technology expert and globally involved hospitality professional here to lead this important conversation. Mr. Miller? Hello. How are you doing today?
I'm good, and I'm not on mute, so I think that's already a good start.
All right, we can hear you. Take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. So welcome to, you said, the first panel of the day, and we're very happy to be with you up until about 4:05 here in Swiss time. So I'm going to at least get started. Let's get ourselves in with who we are speaking to or listening to today. So if I can ask the panelists, and I'll call you up name by name to give a short introduction, then we'll go into the questions. And as mentioned, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat on the platform. So I think we will be polite and go ladies first. And maybe Chris, would you like to start with the introduction, please?
Excellent. Thank you. Hello, and thank you for inviting me to participate in today's panel discussion. I'm Chris Singleton, the CIO, Chief Information Officer of Ceo, one of the fastest growing private women-owned technology service and platform providers in the Americas, with a global OEM footprint offering solutions in hospitality, education, healthcare, enterprise services. Celebrating over 20 years, Ceo's platform, engineering team, tools, and resources adapt to deliver sustainable solutions from in-room entertainment to energy management systems and a suite of employee guest health and safety products. I've spent my entire career in technology, starting actually as an engineer in artificial intelligence expert systems for Hallmark cards. And for the last 18 years, I've been in the hospitality field with large public and private companies like MGM Mirage, Kimpton Hotels, Omni Hotels and Resorts, the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas, and International Cruise and Excursions. Really glad to be a part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Monica, over to you.
Thank you, Ian. And again, thank you for having us all today. My name is Monica Nerger. I'm the Global CIO for Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group. I'm usually in Hong Kong or San Francisco, but I'm joining you today from Lake Tahoe in the west coast of the US. My background is similar to Chris in that we both share cruise lines in our background, also gaming and casino industry. Mandarin Oriental, I hope you're familiar with our brand and that some of you will eventually come and join us. We are 34 hotels in 23 different geographies and growing substantially in the next few years.
Thank you, Monica. Carlos, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the invitation. Pleasure to be with all of you. So I am the founder and CEO of Wyskey. So Wyskey is a Geneva-based Swiss company Cybersecurity, AI, and automation are the three major pillars. I am the founder. I founded this company around 22 years ago. I'm also an investor, and I do merger and acquisition in the cybersecurity AI field. Wyskey is a NASDAQ-listed company now, and we are very, very active in everything which is related to AI. We are now very active also on blockchain, as we have deployed very large-scale blockchain projects. We are actually one of the first truly players in the non-fungible token technology. We'll raise that later, which is a new business model for monetization of assets, and always investing and developing front-end applications in this field. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Carlos. And Chi, would you like to end us off with the intros, please?
Thank you, Ian. My name is Chi Chen. I am a commercial officer at I Reckon You. We provide a middleware solution for hospitality and help our partners to capture and organize their structured and unstructured data and monetize it. Very excited to be on the panel today with everyone.
Wonderful. So we're going to go, obviously, start with the first question. I'm actually going to direct this at Monica, I think is really sort of the main operator here. So of course, depending where you are in the world, we're basically 1 year into the pandemic. So from your perspective, how has technology evolved because of COVID, really from the point of view of Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group?
Sure. And maybe I can say a few words on behalf of the industry as well as Mandarin Oriental. I think we would all say that this period of time has been one of great acceleration. And we were already heading towards a much more digital guest experience. This has just really moved us in that direction much more quickly because of the need to communicate our safety and protocol standards, communicate and engage directly with our guests, keep that guest engagement with some momentum during the period of the peak period of the crisis. For Mandarin Oriental, there was a period where pretty much all of our hotels were closed or had very, very low occupancy. It's been a period of transition. The company has had to pivot because our traditional guest is a high net worth individual that's able to travel internationally. So we've also had to use data and technology to explore the market for new guests in our local markets, and use that guest engagement and data capability to reach out to them. So many, many changes beyond the traditional contactless type technologies that we've been discussing historically.
And Chris, from more sort of the supplier side, we could say it that way, have you seen the similar things, or based around being a supplier, sort of it's been a bit more difficult from your point of view, obviously with the hotel in such disturbances?
Yes, we have seen the acceleration, as Monica mentioned. Had a lot of products in the works, in the pipeline for contactless, touchless communication vehicles, expanding that omni-channel. But we did accelerate it greatly in order to deliver. Innovation's kind of in our DNA, so that was helpful for us to quickly pivot. And I think pivot's going to be one of those key words that you're going to hear from probably throughout the sessions. But very quick to pivot to our key partners and get a hold of securing inventory and making sure that we had a pipeline of supply, which was a challenge during this time frame. So having those key partnerships was very important, but it did enable us to move very quickly. I think we had a renewed focus and concentration on contactless, and also vehicles, as I mentioned, for the communication, to provide a way to explain what the properties were doing for safety and also the security of the guest, but not only the guests, of the employees as well. So acceleration, communication, key.
Thank you. And Chi, from your side of what you do, I Reckon You, have you seen the industry looking to be more engaged with what you're doing? Excuse me. So the whole sort of service bus middleware areas, having better discussions around about generally the technology stack and data?
Yes, a large acceleration, similar to Chris mentioned, contactless and all this, but more so is a larger company focused on the data, the information they have. How can they stitch the information together to engage customer to the meaningful level? The other thing we have started seeing is also some policy changes. I know the technology accelerating, but also we start seeing a larger policy has changed. Some legacy policy, for example, change fee for the airline, cancellation fee, which we're also adjusting some of the technology output to support some of the policy and also new experiences. Some hotels offering day pass, they offering voucher. You can pay now and fly later, or even stay later within 6 months or a year. We're seeing a lot of changes, not just from the traditional technology, but also new experience to support our partners.
Okay. Thank you. I'm actually going to just when I jump back to Monica, actually, just with a follow-up question, because it's interesting when you mentioned it, and obviously the industry, said it's been very much about, because of COVID, about the guest experience, obviously engaging with new guests. Do you think going forward that will still be a focus of the industry, or we may shift and look at more on how technology can help us to reduce costs?
I think short term, we all need to recover from what we've experienced, and that may take some time. And absolutely, cost reduction, it's a bit of a lever, and we're going to talk about that when we discuss data, because the cost of data acquisition and securing that data is also a significant investment for our industry. So I think it's a bit of both. But I think the focus is very much going to be on the investment to engage with the customer and customer acquisition.
Okay, thank you. Just on this, maybe on the opening question, then we'll move on. Maybe there's Carlos, who you have yet to speak to us. One thing that we've heard a lot is, the industry saying, we want to get back to normal, and obviously we understand the frustration of hotel operators and restaurateurs, especially countries like France and Germany, where it close, open, close. Normally when we operate hotels, we open them and then they stay open. But I think nowadays hotel operators are becoming experts in closing hotels as well and reopening them. But do you think these, Monica, you mentioned all the contactless solutions in a way the industry had to react to, will those just become the new normal? Or do you think we will really go back to how we were before?
So I think you said the key word, which is reactive. We've had to react to market conditions. And again, a lot of that focused on reassurance and safety and trying to manage through the complexity of a pandemic until the vaccination programs are more broadly distributed. But I think we are at a tipping point where there is no new normal. And I know we're going to talk about this more as it relates to data, but it's a bit of the perfect storm. So what we're seeing is all of the complexity in data privacy and regulations, which will only become more complex, a shift in customer sentiment around who owns my data, 2 decades of hoteliers investing billions of dollars to get the data right, and we haven't, and new technologies that are emerging to help us to do that. So the technology stack that we have today doesn't support that. In fact, what it does is it almost ensures that somewhere along the journey, we're going to get something wrong. We're going to get a spelling wrong. We're going to get an address wrong. We'll get an email address incorrect, no matter how many times we've engaged with you. And we're exposed. We're exposed more than ever from a cybersecurity perspective. So the tipping point is really moving into the new technologies around self-sovereign identity and digital ledger technologies, blockchain technologies that our industry really needs to get behind to solve some of these big challenges. And that is going to open up an entire new world of guest experience. And it's going to change loyalty programs, and it's going to change the things that we can offer our guests. And we will actually know the guest, which is something, as I said, we've tried to do for a very long time.
I think that's a great answer and a great segue into to keep ourselves on track. The second question theme, I'm just going to direct this to Carlos. I'll ask you to start, please. because in your introduction you mentioned blockchain and AI and everything you're doing at Wyskey. When we talk about digital transformation, and this phrase has been around for a while, and many businesses are doing well. So how and where do we start digitally transforming hospitality, what I would call really one of the largest analog businesses in the world?
Yeah, fully in line with what Monica just said. I think the COVID situation has just accelerated a process, and it started before COVID. Digital identity has been there for many years. Blockchain ledger has been there for a few years. AI has been there for a while. I think that more than digital transformation is digital convergence, because now all the things are getting together. So we are now, Wyskey is one of the type of companies, but there are others, that the approach to digital transformation as a digital convergence process, and the hospitality industry is a perfect industry because it's mainly analog industry. It means that you are basically in a situation where you can leapfrog into the digital transformation faster than others, than they had maybe advanced too much in one of those specific vectors. The issues related to data protection, GDPR, eIDAS, who owns the data, they are going to be part of the design of the infrastructure. And actually, this is a big opportunity for some destinations like Europe or others. Then they will be protecting the data maybe better than other destinations. So that could be actually an argument to where I'm going to travel in the future, right? In terms of where I want to leave my digital information. It is going to put also pressure from the way we analyze the data, as Monica said, about sovereign identity, decentralization of data, being able through international ledgers, and they are going to be maintained by different players and not only one. I mean, this is an end-to-end environment, right? It's from where you live in the house, you take an Uber, you go to the airport, you book a flight, you travel, you book into the hotel, and you return home. You are using one identity only, and this identity belongs to you, and you disclose whatever you need to disclose based on your consent as a consumer. And this is a totally new paradigm shift on where the consent now is on the consumer and not on the platform. And that's going to be disruptive in the way many businesses are going to be made in the future. I mean, big companies like Facebook and others will be actually having trouble to develop this architecture, because consumer consent-oriented platforms require a totally new architecture in terms of the technology. So I believe the hospitality industry is a perfect case study because it deals with humans, And what we are talking here is about human-centric internet. For first time, the internet is going to be around the human. Human are going to be in the center of gravity, versus the human be treated outside the center of gravity and be just one piece of the machine identity process that currently is available. So big transformation, big convergence coming in the next phase.
Just take what you said, Carlos. I think maybe direct this bit back to Chris. You mentioned all the hotel people you work with, and and what you do is, for me, and being in the tech world, I think obviously we can do this. This is great, but how do we take that? Example you mentioned, sovereign identity. So it's my ID, and I decide what I share with who. How do we get our industry collectively to agree on this? So how do we get Monica at Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group to take the same approach as Accor and Marriott and Hilton, and then we have all the independents, especially here in Europe, come in? Because I think what we're all saying, or what you're saying, is this needs to be an industry-wide adoption for it to truly work. And then, of course, we had before Expedia on board, and we get the OTAs, and then the hotel owners and the asset managers, and it seemed like a conversation between 5,000 people, which is never going to get anywhere. So where do we start with this?
Well, it's interesting. 15 years ago, I was on an advisory board with Microsoft focused on the hospitality industry. And at that point, we were trying to simulate an alliance basically across the hospitality brands to create basically a travel vault, which is, to what Carlos was mentioning, a single identity of that consumer, of that traveler, similar to what Canada did with their healthcare system and creating the health vault, where the consumer or the patient was the center of the universe and was the one who was in control of their data, their patient information, and gave consent to who they wanted to have access to those medical records. I think that there's an opportunity now with what's happened, with the challenges that Monica mentioned, that now there might be more of an appetite to actually work together. I think that those alliances are going to be really dependent on maybe industry organizations like HFTP, HCNG, AHLA. I think that they might help to navigate the challenges of it's my data and I own it, when it's really that brand's ownership of that data, but it's the actual consumer. So that pivot, as Carlos was talking about, in brand or identity of that information is going to be a key opportunity for us to work together as a group to create something like that, that travel vault of the future.
So maybe I could just jump in as well on this. You know, these tectonic shifts are all around us, and they're already disrupting the financial industry. It's an adoption discussion about how do we get there. I don't think the OTAs are going away. In a sovereign identity world, you would still have the right or the ability to give the amount of information you share with an OTA. There are some great organizations coming together. The Decentralized Identity Foundation, which is Linux-backed, is one of them that has become quite prominent. Others are in the market. If we don't do something as an industry, it will happen to our industry. And it'll be one of the major technology players that takes that role. So this is truly a moment of opportunity for us to work together and identify what we need as an industry, how we believe our customer wishes to engage with us, and what changes we need to make.
Excuse me, we said, Chris, working in Microsoft, 50 years ago. So that was back in 1970.
15.
Sorry, 15. Sorry, I misheard the 50. But
it feels like 50.
It probably indeed is even 15. Do you think that potentially not in our world of technology, but there's still a sort of this analog mindset within hospitality? And if so, how do we break this?
There definitely is that analog, and then I'll hand it over to Carlos because I know he's got a lot of experience and exposure on this, but a lot of it is a challenge on some of the security procedures and protocols that some of the property or brands have put out at the property level. So maintaining some of the on-premise connectivities, and that controls permissioning and who has access to what. And so I think that that's one of the challenges that they're going to have to overcome and be comfortable with the reliability, the compliance, and the security of cloud-based solutions, but also enabling the high reliability of endpoint management and edge computing, and how you can handle those endpoints very securely at the point of consumer interaction, but yet have the analytics that she talked about at the cloud level, doing all of the number crunching, but deliver those actions and decisions that need to happen at the endpoint.
Yeah, and if you mind,
Carlos, please. And
just to continue, I think it's a very good point. I think digital identity has been there for nearly 30 years, so it's not an issue of technology. And Linux Foundation and Ethernet and everything is happening, Ethereum and everything happening, Hyperledger, they're just adding layers, but they're not solving the fundamental problem, which is where is the business model? I was the chief security officer of the UN for 15 years, building identity projects all over the world, and many did not progress because there was not a business model attached to it. How do I monetize a digital identity? So this is where I think we have a unique opportunity now, because today, and was not possible a year ago, we can monetize consent. And by monetizing consent means that the entire industry of frequent flyer programs and loyalty cards are basically disrupted. It's not the identity itself. The identity, how to store identity, how to put on ledger, this is done. The technology is there and works very well. It is actually the incentivization of me as a consumer to say, I want to travel to Mandarin. I want to disclose that I play golf and I like water ski, but Mandarin doesn't need to know where I live, who my kids are. This is my PII, personal identifiable information, and I want under my control. And I don't want to share that with anybody because nobody needs to know that. only they need to know my attributes. And my attributes are made it available against some kind of compensation. So you want to know, then I play golf, fine, give me some reductions on golf courses, and you do that through cryptocurrencies. Then I put on my wallet, and I can use anywhere into the hospitality industry. There's where we go, and many startups are already emerging out of that consent process, and this is going to be the next bigger players in the future, right? This is where we need to go, into the consent. Identity is not an issue anymore. Identity has been there. I use my identity every day. I vote with my identity in Switzerland, right? So identity has been there, and they're very solid. What we need is to develop the hospitality consent industry and bring all these players together to create interoperability between that consent.
Okay, thank you, Carson. Take what you said, obviously, you said there are, of course, security concerns. I know there were questions in the session beforehand on this. Cybersecurity and all that is not going to go away. And really kind of the next one, because obviously, consent and, this is all around data. Data is something our industry hasn't been great with. We have struggled, and, Monica, you've reacted at HCNG, and Doug Rice really made one of the pretty best impactful ways of trying to get something structured around how we do data. And then, of course, we throw in then GDPR that we have here in Europe. So, in a way, why have we been so bad with data, in a way, conceptually? And, what steps do we need to take to be better on how we use and exploit data to get what you just said, Carlos? It's about this consent now. It's not about loyalty programs or other. So
you want me to answer that, or you?
Don't know. Who would like to start on that one?
You start, Carlos, and I'll add a few words.
So the good news now that AI is able to automate data. Automation of data is the big driver, because AI, less data an AI algorithm needs to analyze, more efficient the AI algorithm is. But the problem with data is that data is unstructured data. It is not trusted. It is not digitally signed, so we don't know if the data is real or not. So all that confuses the AI, and AI is as good as the data you feed into the AI, right? So, for instance, Wyskey is a cybersecurity company. We encrypt data, so the data is always encrypted from the hotel all the way to the cloud. And when it reaches the AI for automation purposes, we digitally sign, so the AI knows that this data comes from Mandarin, doesn't come from somebody else. And that data, it's decapsulated the PII. So we don't need to bring the PII into the data. As I said before, the PII is on the consent of the person, but my data, why not? My data is not associated to who I am. My data is associated to my consent. And that data can be trusted by me if I wish. And that data then is structured in a way that the AI algorithms can perform. I just integrated into Wyskey Arago. Arago is the largest AI company in Europe with one of the largest algorithms, Hero, which is a human learning algorithm, just basically learn from the activity of hotel and reduces the complexity on the operations of the hotel and produces high quality data, which is then digitally signed and secured by Wyskey. So hacker will always try to hack the data, but what are they gonna do? The data is encrypted, it's decapsulated from the PII and has not the hook into the AI algorithm. So the data is unusable. It's like hacking an anonymous transfer. So you have to add those principles of cybersecurity into that process.
Okay, thank you. And Chi, I'm going to move over to you if I may, because obviously we're talking about, I'm going to come back to you, Monica, I'm not ignoring you, but I'm going to get the idea of, if we look at this more at what I'll call a hotel property level, and data and the fragmentation, is maybe part of our problem been that we operate so many different systems. We go back to the days of what we call interfacing, of literally taking like an RS-232 cable and putting it between two computers, and then people move over to, and now we're talking open APIs and middleware and service bus. So do you think part of the problem is just we've taken this very much this fragmented patchwork approach of using tech in hotels? And what do we need to do to fix that part to maybe enable what Carlos is mentioning to really truly happen?
I really truly believe is going back to basic, right? Priority and alignment. We over the years in hospitality, we have added so many technology, and we moved so many technologies too, right? And it seems like people just follow the trends. I can tell you that the latest trend, if you talk to everybody, they will probably tell you it's AI and it's customer data platform. But if you go back 3 years ago, the customer data platform is called data management platform, which means it just continued to evolve. What we really need to do is really getting back to basic and eliminate data silo. That's why, you need a middleware solution. A middleware solution sits between the on-premise and the cloud to capture and organize your data. Right? It's the key that to manage your consumer data, option, communication centrally. And once you have that, you can take a step further to determine as an organization how to consume the data and utilize the information to create a value and experience. While you're going back, talk about consents and all this, I can tell that half of the probably hospitality company in the market probably still cannot centralize the consents, which we would love to get to the digital identity. Just one ID can do everything, but I think our focus right now need to be fundamental basic and then align the benefits, articulate that internally, externally, then we can get to somewhere in the near future.
And Monica, I'll pass this back to you and maybe pick up on what Chi-Chen said about data silos. From your point of view and with Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, what initiatives are you looking at and working with to, again, this idea of being more effective and better with data in general?
Well, full disclosure, we are an I Reckon You customer. So we have spent many years developing our Guest 360 strategy and integrating data and centralizing data to the extent it made sense. But as I said, we're now in a world where I think the old tech stack mentality that we have had in our industry, where you take many different systems and integrate them and try to centralize the data, is a particularly risky one. And that relates to the cybersecurity piece, but also the notion that people don't necessarily want our businesses, not just Mandarin Oriental, but in general, to have this information and so much information. And it's not transparent to them. So what's going to change is that level of transparency. GDPR's, California Privacy Act, many, many different regulations will force the industry to expose what do we have, how do we secure it, and this is what's going to cause the big change in technology.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of time, because we are flying through our time here, I'm actually going to move this next question over to Chris, if I may. And it was actually something that was mentioned a few of the times in one of the previous sessions on revenue management with my colleague Cindy. There's been a lot of talk about automation and in process and hospitality, and how we're very sort of manual and old school and Excel spreadsheets, and the way we love to live. It's always been that way, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. So do you believe that automation and RPA, so robotic process automation, to automated software basically, will become more of the norm in hospitality? And how do we make that step? Because obviously with that can also help us with all the discussion we've been having here.
Exactly. Well, I think that starting small and starting similar to things that are common and understandable to the hospitality groups is the first step, and the easiest place to start are those repeatable activities. Like you mentioned, some revenue management. There's pieces that, several of the hospitality industries, especially around revenue management, have implemented to automate rates and automate the processing of how it's selected. In accounting, automating accounts receivable invoices that are being sent out, payables that are coming in and where they go. Those are some of the repeatable processes that RPA is great with. There's widgets galore out there that are providing this AI machine learning RPA capabilities, and that can be easily implemented. That is a starting point, I think, to let them enable the machines to do what they do well, repeatable pieces of information and activity, and then hand off more time to the human to make more value-added decisions. AI machine learning is there to improve and speed up the process. It's not necessarily that it takes it away. it just shifts it to other areas where the human can be more valuable. So I think that's really an important opportunity for us to look at. I think that there are some things that can be done and automated from a cost savings perspective. So we talked about that total cost of ownership earlier. I think from an operations perspective, more than ever, to control and manage occupancy while it's low or it's closed and then open. Having the capability to automate some of the energy management systems and truly actually be able to get the ROI on that are some of the things that will help offset, hopefully, the investment in some of this digital identity capabilities with cost savings from an operational perspective.
Thank you. And Monica, is that something you're actively looking at within Mandarin?
Oh, several years ago, we actually implemented it, and I can share. It depends what end of the spectrum you're at. I agree with Chris very much. As a starting point, you have to be certain, however, that they are truly repeatable processes. And I think we all know our industry to know that the processes from one hotel to another may vary. And also, don't forget that the cybersecurity tools that we use to protect our systems, one small change, one update in a cybersecurity tool could interrupt your RPA process. So it is definitely an entry point, an opportunity for efficiency, but further down the line, you'll want to do something a little more sophisticated.
Carlos, Chi-Chan, do you have an opinion on this one?
I can give a little bit because we touch on, I really believe human and machine really bring different abilities and strength to the business. I 100% agree with Chris, like a larger process in revenue management, finance can be 100% automated. Just need to make sure monitor the business rule, right? Because machine is faster, more accurate, and consistently rational. And it's really that's what they do. However, machines are not intuitive, emotional, or culturally sensitive, which means I think this ability make us human effective, and we need to anticipate what machine or AI means in the relationship to how we think, act, and work to integrate the new technology kind of like strategically into any organization.
Okay, and then excuse me, I throw a question back at you, and maybe to Carlos, just as maybe before we move into Q&A. If I'm thinking about the students watching this, and we may have a student thinking, my career path is going to be revenue management and hospitality, and suddenly what we're saying is, well, you're probably going to be replaced by a computer. And then you link this in with the fact that we've always heard it. Hospitality is a people business. What would be your counter arguments to go back and say, yes, it is a people business, but it's also about technology and efficiency and all the things we've spoken about. How do we break down that very much that ever recurring phrase that we have?
I think it's really being different discipline together, right? If you take a look at it, revenue management has been very focused on forecasting, demand, pricing. But in that aspect, you also need to take a look at acquisition. How does revenue management can bring the digital team, the e-commerce team into the picture to drive the full engagement with the customer? Right? It's no longer just on the price. Also understand what's the cost to acquire someone through a digital channel, and especially now moving forward without cookie data. How can you demonstrate that instead of just going to OTA, right? Like Monica said, OTA here to stay. They one other channel. OTA is no different than the GDS, right? Travel agent, they exist for a long time. They don't share any information beside the payment information, guest name. That's it. Which I think is slowly moving to strategically. How can revenue management will evolve to bring other disciplines together? Is no longer just focused on saying pricing and forecast, because that I believe that machine would do a better job. Which means how do you elevate yourself into a better position to drive other initiatives to bring the organization forward?
Okay, thank you. So purely, and I'd love to keep on discussing all these points because I think this is so interesting, but we've question time. We need to move on to questions. So I have some been sent through by the YHS organizing team, and I don't know who wants to start with this one. But the question is, should hospitality have their own cybersecurity team? Is they have their own security team? So imagine on property security, or should they work in one and the same team? So really is, do we do security ourselves or give it to somebody else?
My stronger advice is to give it to somebody else, because cybersecurity, including for very large organizations like banks or even governments, due to the new compliance on cybersecurity, is actually a difficult task and requires very high levels of accreditation, ISO standards and others, which are very costly. And actually to find the people, which is one of the major problems in our days on cybersecurity experts, is going to be difficult. So my advice, it's always a hybrid, right, between what you can do internally versus what you need to do with specialized companies. And it is important to have your own chief security officer in that organization as a way to know exactly what is happening. But the rest of the heavy duty, like data center, storage, cloud, and all that, needs to be decentralized, and if possible, get experts doing it for you. That would be my advice. Anyway, I'm a cybersecurity company, so I am biased on that, but that will be my advice.
Chris, any thoughts on this?
I would agree with you on that. Let the experts who are constantly seeing and getting exposed to the changing regulations, compliance, the security, the hacks that ties in with the governmental agencies, with security agencies. That's really important, and it's hard for a citizen to do off the street. So, leaving it to the experts, I think, is a good idea. But you still obviously do, like Carlos mentioned, have a chief security officer.
And those tools and technologies that are being used by third party are far more sophisticated than we can invest in, and they are continually changing. I think the purpose of having somebody within your business is often from an operational perspective. Am I bringing in cybersecurity as a culture? What about the training and awareness that needs to happen inside a business? And then, of course, if an incident does occur, you do need that leadership and a point person to help coordinate all of the many different variables that happen.
What you said, Monica, before, of the relation between cybersecurity and digital transformation and making sure that cybersecurity is aligned with automation is very important, right? Because one can jeopardize the other.
Absolutely. But if you just maybe take that question and just move it to one side, back to you, Monica. Obviously, when we start with technology in hospitality, it's really who's the person who knows how to program Fidelio. You're now the IT director. That's where we started years ago. Would you say that also part of the role of you and your people in the technology department in Mandarin is moving a lot more towards compliance? And PCI and GDPR and all the others. So in terms of the hotels, in a way, you're trying to operate within the best rules, I'm going to say, because of a different compliance.
And Mandarin Oriental does have a data privacy officer, but it is the responsibility jointly between my team and the data privacy team, and to a large degree our legal team, to ensure compliance.
Yeah.
Okay. Chi-Chan, any thoughts on the security area whilst we're here?
No, I think that everyone covered it. Definitely, you need to have a security officer, but defer that to the expert, outsource it. They do a better job because the back actors usually move faster than anybody else in the world. They're usually 2 steps ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move to another question. And I'm actually trying to, in a way, link everything you're saying. So we've, you mentioned, Carl, sovereign identity, data silos, and the use of data, meaning cybersecurity. So I think the question here is, I'm trying to modify it slightly. How can we effectively use technology for our customers and the guests and the customer experience without it seeming over evasive? So that we know too much about the guests or we have too much data about them. How can we ensure that we're not crossing that line of becoming too intrusive with our guests? I don't know.
I'll start, I guess. I think from a transparency perspective is trying to be as transparent for the guest, the consumer as possible. And in ownership of that consent, as Carlos mentioned, I think, giving it in their hands to say, yes, I want this entity, we name that entity, to have access to my preferences as he mentioned versus my PII. So what is the information and being able to control it at a consumer level?
I would like to use digital certification because they have been there for many years. That's what we use it's an ITU, International Telecommunication Union standard, runs very well with 4G, 5G, and others. And an X509, which is the standard used for digital identification, you don't have to provide anything. I can single sign on in Monica's website with my digital identity without disclosing who I am, and then they will recognize, because the browser will recognize that my identity has been issued by a trusted certification authority, and then I can go inside her page, and then I can just add whatever they need to know from me more than what is already on that certificate. But that's only happened once. And once I check out with my data as well. I don't check out only my physical person, I check out with my data. So my data is retrieved back and is owned by me. This is the new standard. I mean, this is where the industry is going. We are doing in Wyskey is one of the companies that is helping on the COVID certification worldwide. And we have several major deployments, including in Seychelles, which is one of the countries that they're using our technology. And this is the standard. I mean, people will not want anymore to give that amount of information just to check into a hotel. I don't need to give all that. It's like inviting somebody into your house. I always use that analogy, but that's what it is. I can invite you guys to have a dinner in my house one night and continue this discussion, but I only invite one night. I don't invite every night, right? So my consent on that specific action can be now programmed into my digital certificate. So the consent and the retrieval of the data, the moment I want to retrieve the data is essentially, actually this technology is going even to the next level that is associated also with data. So the day I retire, I don't want to exist anymore on the internet, I can destroy all the data being generated because that data is indexed with my digital certificate. So that's the only way to do it. And mathematically it's easy. And by the way, that's not a conflict with sovereign identity, which is more a decentralization of the validation of the data, but not issuing the identity. Because some countries, the issuing identity is a geopolitical thing. If you go to India, they want their identities to be in India. If you go to America, so each country geopolitically wants to run that national identity process, but obviously decentralization. But digital certificates are there for that effect.
So I'll add to Carlos's perspective, and I realize all of this discussion around self-sovereign identity and digital technology ledgers, this is all new for our industry. But what's going to really push the boundaries now are these vaccine passports. Same dilemma, and it's happening to us fast across the industry. How do we know that it is safe for people to travel? And how are we going to ensure that that data is being used for what it was intended to be used, not for other purposes? And I think this will push this to the forefront for our industry.
Okay. Thank you. Just in terms of time, because we're down to our final 2 minutes. If any of the students who are watching us within YHS and who have hopefully, from my point of view at least, been considering a career in hospitality technology, if you could give them one very short piece of advice, what would it be?
I'll start. If you love people and you love technology and you love to see the world, you could not choose a better career in your life.
I would say, understanding and having that expertise of the technology is great, but you'll accelerate your career by understanding the business model, how the business makes money. And you will quickly be able to accelerate through your career path by having that combination.
Chan?
I will. Oh, sorry, Chan.
Definitely, if you love travel and connection with people, this is the industry to do it. And it doesn't matter, is it technology, revenue management, commercial, finance, there's always have the opportunity for travel and connecting with people.
Carlos?
Yeah, I would say if you like customer-facing situation, you should be investing in disruptive technology that helps that. And for that, you don't need to be a technical person. It's more like an emotional human person. And if you have a very strong technical background, then I will focus on non-facing customer, analyzing, mixing your experience into the hospitality with chatbot, messaging, all the things, then they are going to be there to help in your work. But is it clear? I mean, I have two, I told you the other day, I have two girls from EHL. One of them is going into AI as a postgraduate, and another is going more into the traditional in-person customer services. So it depends very much on the profile of the student. But the good news is that there's massive amount of opportunity on both of them because the industry is disrupted.
Perfect. Thank you, Carlos. Unfortunately, we are out of time. If I was to summarize the key points that are taken away from the session with you all, is start small is one thing. No more data silos. Sovereign identity is here to stay, as well as OTAs. That associations and initiatives are going to be playing a role, especially in what we do with data. And that Carlos has invited us all around his house for a beer. So that's very nice.
Only one.
Only one, of course. Only one.
And then I usually
as our time is done, I'd just like to thank all of you. Chi-Chan, Carlos, Monica, Chris, thank you so much for being a part of this. I'm sure it's greatly appreciated by all the attendees and all the students. And again, hopefully we've inspired them to keep looking at tech, get involved in hospitality technology, because it is a great part of our industry and one that is only going to grow going forward. So thank you for being part of YHS Global.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe.
All right, thank you so much to our wonderful panel. As a spectator, I just want to say that it was really cool to see how the synergy of ideas actually got flowing between you all, and we could really feel like we were present for advances happening in the industry. I have so many thoughts that I wrote down for really cool comments that I liked, but we don't have time to go over all of it. So I just want to mention a highlight. I really, really liked the thought that Ms. Singleton had about making a traveler profile like the Canadian healthcare system, where we can keep traveler data and how consumers can really take control of their own data. I thought that was really cool. Did you have a highlight, Sandy?
I really enjoyed listening to the part about how you need both like technology and you need the human intuition, because we bring the emotional intelligence while the technology brings the data and the tools that we need to really propel to the positive future. So thank you for that. I really didn't think about that until your panel, so that was great. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much to all of our panelists, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, morning, or afternoon. Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, everyone, we've made it to the end of day one. Thank you to our speakers, delegates, and attendees for joining us through our virtual adventure. We heard from industry leaders such as Peter Brenman from IHG Hotel and Resorts, who was so passionate about making sure his team was diverse and growing positively through this time in our pandemic.
And then, after listening to their exciting challenge presentation by IHG Hotels and Resorts, our YHS 2021 student delegates had the chance to practice some mindfulness exercises with a mindfulness practitioner. A much-needed break, I'm sure, from a busy day.
And then we dabbled into the financial aspects of our industry with Mr. Bugarju and Dr. Hyo, who told us about the aspects of data collection and how it is a key factor in our industry's growth.
And then, as our grand finale to our Rethinking Day, we got to listen to a forward-thinking panel of experts in data technology. We listened to them as their ideas came together, and they ended up answering all of the questions that were posed by our speaker team, Alex and Christina, for the idea of this panel in the first place. And I just want to say it was really awesome to watch all these ideas come together. I think we really hit the rethink theme out of the ballpark today.
We started the summit with the process of rethinking, which is the first step into our macroscopic view. And tomorrow, we take the next step, bringing the ideas from mind to paper by resculpting our wonderful industry that we call home. Attendees, thank you so much for watching, and see you tomorrow, either bright and early, late in the evening, or just in the afternoon. Goodbye, guys.
Goodbye to our attendees, and if you are a YHS 2021 student delegate, please don't go anywhere because we have another exciting session for you coming up right now. So please go to your agenda and go click on the next item up. See you in a minute.